Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Tending to Change, and I'm your host, Jenny Juarez. So last week, we began a discussion about cultivating witness consciousness and how this more spacious, non-judgmental perspective can support us in looking clearly at ourselves without the emotional charge that usually accompanies a more egoic or main character perspective. I specifically tied this discussion to a personal story about my own struggle with alcohol addiction and how mindful presence and practices supported me in my 6-year journey of healing that addiction and reclaiming my personal power, my responsibility. Mindfulness and present moment awareness gives us back our ability to choose our response, whether that's to our personal experiences, to our thoughts and emotions, or to the world around us. It's a powerful tool when understood in this way. But today, I'd like to continue the conversation around addiction, and instead of focusing on how to work with unsupportive habits, I'd like to discuss why they might be there in the first place. And for this, I'd like to remind you all of the commonly understood definition of addiction: continued use despite adverse consequences. Now, again, I'll say that through the lens of this definition, addiction is not limited to drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol. Any repetitive behavior that we find short-term relief or pleasure in, and we continue to use despite any adverse long-term consequences, constitutes an addiction. And by that definition, pretty much every single one of us has some type of addiction. Examples of this could include smartphone use, social media, exercise or sports, gambling, video gaming, sex or pornography, food, news and politics, relationships, work. If it's hurting us in some way, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally, or it's negatively impacting our relationships or our work in the world, it's causing adverse consequences and it's worthy of a deeper investigation. I would encourage you to sit with this as a contemplation in your own stillness practice to see what comes up for you. But before doing so, I also want to give some more information about why addictions form in the first place, gleaned from things I've learned both from professionals in the field and from my own personal experience. Grasping the why behind our addictive tendencies can be a powerful support because it fosters compassion both for ourselves and for the people in our lives who might also be struggling with addiction. So first, I'd like to turn to the teachings of Dr. Gabor Maté, who is a Canadian-Hungarian physician. He has worked in family practice, palliative care, and with addicted adults on the streets of Vancouver in Canada. And because of this, he's developed a particular interest in childhood development, trauma, addiction, and the potential lifelong impacts these things can have on our physical and mental health. He's also the author of several books, including In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts and The Myth of Normal. So Gabor argues in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, that contrary to what some medical institutions and our legal system might claim, addiction is neither a choice nor primarily a disease, but that it originates in a human being's attempt to solve a problem, whether that's the problem of emotional pain or overwhelming stress, loss of connection, loss of control, or of a deep discomfort with the self. His mantra is, the first question is not why the addiction, but why the pain? You see, our addictive habits are actually a very rational response to pain. They can provide, in the short term, a feeling of pain relief, relaxation, reward, connection, or even motivation. And we engage with them over and over again despite knowing of their potentially life-threatening consequences, because for a million reasons, being present to the moment is unbearable. But why is being present in our bodies and minds so unbearable? Well, according to a study conducted by the National Institute of Mental Health, Over 70% of adults have been exposed to a big T trauma, such as the unexpected death of a loved one, being mugged or sexually assaulted, experiencing a life-threatening injury or illness, domestic violence, divorce, war, poverty, catastrophic weather events, auto accidents, and so much more. And Gabor, among other trauma specialists, point to childhood trauma in particular, but trauma in general as the root of this pain. In fact, trauma is the Greek word for wound. But the big T traumas aren't the only life events that can wound us. As infants, we have an innate need for secure attachment to our caregiver because this attachment is necessary for survival. This is evident just by looking at the biological, physiological mechanisms at play when a child is born. For example, the preference for the smell and sound of a mother develops in an infant while in utero. It was actually surprising to notice, and this is maybe an overshare, but my underarm odor strengthened postpartum, and I was told that it was to help my baby find the breast. And the act of breastfeeding actually releases opiate-like endorphins in both the mom and the baby to encourage bonding and relaxation. And these are just two small examples of how we are biologically wired for connection. So if that attachment is interrupted or severed, whether it's due to situations like extended NICU stays, incarceration, death, or even a mother or father who is emotionally or physically absent or neglectful, this can cause wounding or trauma in the child. Gabor states again and again that trauma is not what happens to you, but it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens. And that's actually very good news. It means that not every single instance of these types of situations become traumatic wounds. It also means that while traumatic wounds can impact our sense of self and the way we view and move through our lives, we do have the power to transform our wounds. Through presence and awareness, we have the potential to assign new meaning to our life experiences. So much of therapy is based upon this. We can also acknowledge and attend to the roots of our pain and discover alternative strategies that support us in healthy ways. And I again just want to acknowledge what a journey this all is. It is a winding road, and there will be peaks and valleys, expansion and contraction, and moments of clarity and profound confusion. And it can be so beneficial for us to call in the support of therapists, spiritual directors, teachers, and even trusted friends and loved ones to walk alongside us. It's deep work, and while some of it must be done alone, much of our spiritual journey is benefited by good company. Now, turning back toward my own life experiences, I want to share that an important part of my own path was honoring my addictions. What do I mean by this? Well, looking at my own life, I realized how much wounding I carried inside of me from my early childhood. Now, this is not an attack on my parents. I know that, as with all of us, they were always doing the best they could with what they knew. And they both carry some of their own unacknowledged and unresolved childhood wounding that inevitably bled onto me early on. And my trauma wounding was not only a result of my relationship to my parents. It was also accumulated through interactions with other family members, bullying done by peers at school, as well as total strangers, sexual harassment and assault incurred both within and outside of my romantic relationships, and plenty of other situations too. And I see now that the addictions I developed in response to these wounds actually helped me survive. Frankly, if it weren't for drugs and alcohol that I used in my teens, I may not have made it out of adolescence alive. They helped me numb the indescribable mental and emotional pain that plagued me day in and day out. My addictions kept me alive until I could find the tools and the resources I needed to process what I was avoiding or escaping. And because of that, I don't feel ashamed about my addictions anymore. I'm grateful for what they carried me through, destructive though they were. And I'm even more grateful now for the new skills and resources I have found to help me work through challenging and painful experiences in a more healthy and life-affirming way. Now, you may recall from my previous episode that I still occasionally have a drink, maybe a handful of times a year. And while I realize that with certain substances, complete abstinence is really the only path to healing, and there's so much benefit to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I personally don't do well with total abstinence. I've learned through self-observation that when I'm told I can't do something, my inner rebel goes crazy. This is great if I'm told I can't achieve a particular goal, but it's not so great if I'm told that I'll never eat a brownie or drink a glass of wine again. So again, I'm not ever going to say that the way I'm living is the one right way and that everyone should follow me, because that is absolutely not true. But what I will say is that what works for me is an ongoing process of self-observation, that good old witness perspective, paired with discriminative discernment. When I'm present to the now moment, both within and without, I can clearly see my motivations, my intentions, and I can determine what is the highest choice at any given moment. So if I'm feeling pulled to buy a bottle of vodka because I'm grieving or something shocking happened, probably best to say no and go for a walk or call a friend instead. But if it's mine, my husband's anniversary, and I'm in the mood for a glass of wine with dinner, I'm not going to berate myself for saying yes. But I am going to check in with myself before, during, and after, and I'm not going to drink to excess. I also want to share how important it is to me to set this example for my children. Our society is absolutely drenched in alcohol. I live in Grand Rapids, which is considered Beer City. There are craft breweries and wineries and liquor stores everywhere around here. And much like everywhere else in the country, the 21st birthday is almost always eagerly anticipated for this rite of passage to finally have a legal adult beverage. But with such rampant alcohol addiction, not to mention the problems associated with drinking like DUIs, liver disease, mental health issues, I'd really like to show an example to my children of a different way to live. I want them to know that their lives are still interesting, even if they aren't full of harrowing tales of drunken parties and exploits. And that there's no requirement to get wasted just because you turn 21. Not only that, I want to teach them through my own example that you can change even deeply rooted behaviors. I want them to know how capable they are of changing their mind about how they define themselves. That our pasts may influence us in the present, but they don't define us unless we allow them to. I will say, though, that choosing to let go of alcohol can be a lonely decision at first, especially if all of your closest friends and even partners are drinkers. What I have found in my experience is that if you turn down a drink at a party or order water at dinner when everyone else is partaking, there is a tendency for people to take it personally at first. They might even project their own shame onto you and take a defensive posture, as though my sobriety is an accusation or an attack on them. Like I said in the last episode, it is very strange to me that alcohol is the only addiction that people question when you stop using. In many circles, it's weird to be a non-drinker. So to choose this path for yourself may mean letting go of certain people in your life, even if only in the short term. Personally, I struggled for many years being around other people who were drinking if I wasn't. I didn't want to go to bars or drinking-centered events, and that felt very isolating at times. The good news is, going alcohol-free is now becoming quite a movement, and there are even non-alcoholic bars popping up in cities all over the place. People are taking up other activities such as hiking, kayaking, pickleball, and other sports and games to enjoy with friends instead of meeting at the local bar or dance club after work. All this to say, there is a very large and growing community of people out there who can honor you exactly where you're at and where you want to be in your life. All you need to do is seek them out. And there are so many resources available to us to support us when the going gets tough, because life will not stop throwing curveballs at us, and we need helpful tools to get us through those challenging moments in our lives. And that's what I'm trying to offer out to the world through this podcast. So let's finish today with a very simple grounding practice to help us return to the present moment whenever we find ourselves getting lost in thought or zoning out. I'd like you to take a moment to just check into your posture. Take a dignified seat with your weight evenly distributed, feet flat on the ground, honoring the curves of the spine by toning the low belly and drawing the low back in and up, letting the spine lengthen through the neck and the crown of the head. And with your palms lightly resting on the tops of your thighs, just turn your head side to side, looking around at the space around you, taking note of colors, textures, shapes, not necessarily naming them, but just noticing them, seeing where you are in time and space. Now turning your attention to the breath, you may want to gently close your eyes, or you can keep them open, whatever feels right to you in this moment. But feeling the breath as it enters the nose and then exhaling long and deep. Noticing the expansion in the chest and shoulders around the rib cage as you inhale. And the softening of the shoulder blades down the back with the exhale. Just feeling your body breathing for a moment. Now turning your awareness to your feet, whether they're on the ground or a floor, in shoes or barefooted. Just feeling the weight of your feet press against the ground beneath you. And imagining that roots are growing from the bottom of your feet, extending down through the floor to the ground beneath you, extending through the earth, the soil, the rocks, extending deep down into the earth. As you take your next breath, imagine that you're inhaling through the feet, drawing this strength and stability from the earth, pulling that breath up into the core of the pelvis, where you feel weighty and stabilized. And as you exhale, imagine as though you're exhaling through the soles of the feet, sending the breath and the energy down through your roots, giving it back to the earth, letting her hold you, trusting that she can hold whatever's up for you. She's so vast and such a beautiful source of stability and resources for us. And as you continue this breathing in from the feet and exhaling through the feet into the earth, just expressing some gratitude for all that the world does to support us. How even when we're not co-participating with the breath, we're being breathed. Life is taking care of us moment by moment, even when we don't realize it. And in this moment, you are safe. You are okay. Deeply held and grounded, anchored to the breath, to your feet, to the earth. Lovingly held in this now moment where all is well. I want you to tuck this practice into your spiritual tool belt. It is such a simple but profound practice of grounding. Just looking around the room, orienting yourself to the space, and then feeling the breath inside of your body, feeling your feet on the ground. So powerful, so simple, so beneficial. And I just want to end today with deep gratitude. These are not easy topics to discuss or to think about, but you're engaging with it for whatever reason it's resonating. And I hope that you can glean something of benefit and value to take into your own life and bring in some expanded awareness and profound compassion for the work that you're doing on yourself. I'm deeply grateful to you for your presence in these conversations, and I look forward to continuing it on next week. So until then, I hope that you take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.